In the contemporary fishing community of Kashega, Alaska, the sea remained a source of livelihood and a constant threat. The men and women who worked these waters respected the ocean's power. Still, they relied on its bounty to sustain their families. It was a life of hard work and uncertainty, where each trip could bring either fortune or disaster. The first sign of trouble came quietly, almost unnoticed. A fishing boat failed to return one evening. The Coast Guard was alerted and a search was initiated. They found the boat adrift, its crew of 4 missing. The vessel showed signs of damage, as if it had been struck by something large and powerful. The community mourned the loss, but accidents were not uncommon in these dangerous waters, so they forgot about them quickly. However, it happened again. Another boat was found wrecked, its crew of 3 missing and later found dead. The pattern became impossible to ignore as more boats were discovered and destroyed, and their crews were gone. When the number of fishermen killed was counted, it was up to 17 in just 3 months. This sent waves of fear and grief through Kashega. Theories and rumors spread like wildfire. Some blamed rogue waves, others spoke of a curse, while a few whispered about a monstrous sea creature. Desperation grew, and the local authorities and Coast Guard could not provide answers. The town needed help, someone who could decipher the mystery behind the tragedies. Enter Dr. Claire Roberts, a renowned marine biologist specializing in oceanography and sea creatures' behavior. Her arrival in Kashega was met with both hope and skepticism. Claire's reputation preceded her. She was known for her deep understanding of marine life and ability to solve complex ecological problems. Claire's first task was to examine the boat's wreckage. The damage was unlike anything she had ever seen. The hulls were torn apart, splintered by immense force. Her initial hypothesis pointed to a rogue wave or an underwater seismic event. Still, the regularity and specificity of the attacks suggested a more deliberate perpetrator. Her suspicions were confirmed when she examined some of the bodies. The injuries were consistent with those inflicted by a large marine predator. Deep gashes and bite marks indicated the presence of a powerful jaw and sharp teeth. The pattern of the wounds and the sheer strength required to inflict such damage narrowed the list of suspects. It pointed unmistakably to an orca. Orcas, known as killer whales, were apex predators and brilliant creatures. They were known to exhibit complex behaviors and could hunt in packs. However, attacks on humans were exceedingly rare. Orcas typically avoided human interaction and had never been known to target fishing boats so systematically. Claire faced a baffling anomaly, an orca driven by an unknown rage singling out fishermen and their vessels. Claire set out to gather more data. She equipped a research vessel with underwater cameras and acoustic equipment, hoping to capture evidence of the rogue orca's behavior. She spent days on the water, scouring the coastline and monitoring the movements of marine life. Her efforts were initially fruitless. The sea seemed to hold its secrets tightly, offering no clues. Then, one foggy morning, Claire's patience was rewarded. The cameras picked up movement beneath the surface, a large shadow gliding silently through the depths. The footage was grainy but unmistakably showed an orca, its black and white markings distinctive even in the murky water. Claire's heart raced as she reviewed the footage. This was no ordinary orca. Its behavior was erratic and aggressive. It circled the research vessel, ramming it with alarming force before disappearing into the gloom. Claire analyzed the acoustic data, searching for anomalies in the orca's vocalizations. She discovered something unexpected. The orca's calls were atypical, filled with distress and agitation. Orcas communicated using a complex language of clicks and whistles, and the vocalizations Claire recorded were unlike anything she had encountered before. They were haunting, a cry of rage and pain that sent chills down her spine. Determined to understand the cause of the orca's behavior, Claire delved into the region's recent history. She discovered that the local fishing industry had significantly changed in the past year. Overfishing had depleted the stocks of salmon and herring, the primary food sources for orcas. In their desperation to maintain their catch, some fishermen resorted to illegal practices, including using explosives to stun the fish, causing immense disruption to the marine ecosystem. Claire hypothesized that the rogue orca's aggression directly responded to these disruptions. The depletion of food sources and the violent methods used by the fishermen had likely traumatized the animals. It was acting out of a primal survival instinct, lashing out at the perceived threat to its existence. With this understanding, Claire knew that stopping the orca would require addressing the root causes of its behavior. She convened a meeting with the fishermen, presenting her findings and urging them to change their practices. The reception was mixed. Some were sympathetic, recognizing their role in the crisis. In contrast, others were skeptical and unwilling to acknowledge the impact of their actions on the marine environment. Claire faced an uphill battle. The fishermen's livelihoods were at stake, and the community was divided. She knew persuading them to adopt sustainable practices would take time and effort. She continued her research, documenting the orca's movements and vocalizations and gathering evidence to support her case. In the meantime, the attacks continued. Another boat was found adrift, and its crew was missing. The fear in the village intensified, and the calls for more drastic measures grew louder. Some demanded that the orca be hunted and killed, viewing it as a monster that needed to be eradicated. Claire was determined to prevent such an outcome. She believed that understanding and addressing the underlying causes of the orca's behavior was the only way to resolve the crisis. So she sought allies among environmental organizations and government agencies. The breakthrough came when a group of fishermen, led by a respected elder, agreed to participate in a pilot project. They adopted sustainable practices, using less invasive methods, and reducing their catch to allow the fish stocks to recover. The rogue orca's behavior began to change. The attacks decreased in frequency, and the animal's vocalizations became less distressed. Claire believed that the orca was responding to the improved conditions, sensing that the threat to its survival was diminishing. Despite these positive developments, tensions remained high. Some factions within the community continued to call for more aggressive action, viewing the orca as an ever-present danger. Claire knew that lasting change would require a fundamental shift in attitudes and practices, which could take years. In time, the fishing community of Kashiga began to heal. The fishermen adapted to the new practices, improving their catches as the marine ecosystem recovered. The orca sightings became less frequent, and the animal seemed to have found peace. The night was cold and dense with fog in late autumn of 2003, off the rugged coasts of Western Australia. The Sea Whisper, a fishing vessel, navigated cautiously through thick fog. Her lights barely cut through the white blanket that covered the sea. Captain Peter Walsh and his 4-member crew were returning home from a successful but exhausting fishing trip. The mood aboard the Sea Whisper was subdued. After days at sea, the crew was tired, including Liam O'Connor as first mate, Sarah Jensen as engineer, James McAllister, and Thomas Reed. The crew was eager to reach their home port before dawn and enjoy the warmth of their families. The crew was jolted out of their trance as the boat hummed along the still waters. The ship had hit something huge in the water. It wasn't a floating log or debris. A series of frantic bangs were heard against the hull after the impact. Captain Walsh's command echoed through the fog as he ordered the crew to activate the lights and investigate their collision. Liam swiftly grabbed a spotlight from the deck and aimed it toward the port side. His hands remained steady despite the rush of adrenaline. The light revealed a terrifying sight, a giant scaled shark thrashing in the water, its tail delivering powerful swipes against the hull of the Sea Whisper. The crew reacted with horror at the sight as the propeller of their vessel sliced the shark's dorsal. The animal's confusion and pain were palpable. Its dark eyes rolled wildly in the water as it struggled. Sarah's voice was tense as she pleaded for them to get away, noting that the agitated creature could cause further damage to the boat. Thomas was told to change their course by Captain Walsh, who nodded. As they tried to steer clear of the injured shark, it became apparent that the shark would not let them go quickly. It followed, with its tail beating furiously in the water, fueled by pain and aggression. James felt a chill down his spine as he watched the shark's relentless pursuit. Half to himself and half to anyone listening, he muttered that it seemed like the shark had a score to settle. The fog thickened as the Sea Whisper, trying to outrun an injured shark, drove forward. Visibility was reduced to almost nothing. The only sounds that could be heard were the thrashing of the shark and the struggling engine of the boat. Captain Walsh instructed calmly but firmly to keep the boat steady. They could not stop there. They needed to head to more transparent water in an attempt to lose the pursuing creature. The Sea Whisper, however, was in poor condition. Sarah went below to check the engine, hoping it would last until they reached safe waters. The crew was still on deck, and their eyes were straining to see through the fog. They were looking for any sign of the shark's next move. The tension was palpable as each wave crashed against the boat's hull. Each sound of water breaking on the hull served as a warning of the predator that lurked just out of sight. The crew was pinned between the merciless sea and the mariner's curse as the night went on. The situation aboard Sea Whisper became increasingly dangerous as the night went on. The fog thickened and enveloped the boat, dampening all hope for escape. Driven by instinct and pain, the shark continued to pursue the ship, with each attack more aggressive than the previous. Captain Walsh stood at the helm with his eyes fixed on instruments and a grim determination to navigate through the dense fog. The cold air was filled with rhythmic thuds as the shark's body crashed into the boat. Sarah looked worried when she returned from the engine. Although the engine held up for the moment, the strain from outrunning the shark had taken its toll. Fuel gauges were dropping faster than usual, a testament to their desperate flight through treacherous water. She informed the captain they could only keep up with this pace longer. They were burning fuel rapidly and the engine was overheating. Captain Walsh nodded with his jaw set. "We need a new strategy. We cannot outrun it, but we can outsmart him." Captain Walsh quickly gathered his crew and devised a dangerous strategy. The remaining flares on the boat would distract the sharks and give them enough time to escape to a nearby cove they had already passed. The shallow water of the cove made it unsuitable for sharks. Despite the tension, Liam and Thomas prepared flares with their hands still steady. On Captain Walsh's command, they fired the first flare in the night sky. The light arced across the water and landed a few meters away from the boat. Attracted by the sudden flash of light, the shark veered away from its course to follow the flare. Captain Walsh took advantage of this distraction and steered Sea Whisper towards the cove. The boat was lurching forward as the engine groaned under the strain. They were desperate to get to safety. The water slowed as they approached, and the bottom was visible through the fog clearing. When the shark realized its prey had escaped into less navigable water, it launched a final and furious attack on the boat. The Sea Whisper was shook violently from the bow to the stern. As the boat shuddered, everyone braced and grabbed onto anything they could. The massive shark scraped the boat's hull as its movements became more frantic. With great effort, Captain Walsh maneuvered his boat into the middle of the cove, where the water level was too low for the shark's attack to continue. The shark could not continue its attack and lingered on the cove's edge. It circled before turning around and disappearing into deeper waters. As tensions finally subsided, the Sea Whisper crew heaved a collective sigh. The crew of the Sea Whisper was safe for the moment, as they anchored themselves in the shallow cove. As dawn approached, the fog lifted and revealed the beautiful coastline. The crew enjoyed their surroundings as the sun rose, casting a golden glow on the water. They had been tested, and the ordeal strengthened their bonds. It also deepened their respect for sea creatures and the ocean. Captain Walsh turned to his crew and saw their faces, tired but grateful. He told them to secure the boat and then rest, acknowledging that they had earned it. The Sea Whisper crew and she remained in the cove as the sun rose, with the events of that night serving as a reminder of ocean unpredictability and the beauty and danger of their marine world. In the summer of 2005, in the coastal town of Gansbaai, South Africa, Tom and his wife Lisa decided to spend a sunny afternoon on the ocean. Known for its scenic beauty and abundant marine life, Gansbaai was a favorite spot for locals and tourists alike. Tom and Lisa had been married for 5 years, and they often enjoyed these peaceful boat rides, using them to escape the hustle and bustle of everyday life. The sky was clear that day, and the sea was calm. The couple set off from the shore in their small boat with a packed lunch and a cooler full of drinks. They laughed and chatted as the boat gently rocked on the waves. Tom, feeling exceptionally playful, was in high spirits. He loved making Lisa laugh and often teased her in good fun. As they cruised along the coast, Tom got a naughty idea. He thought it would be funny to scare Lisa by pushing her into the water. With a playful grin, he snuck up behind her and gave her a gentle push. Lisa, taken by surprise, screamed as she fell overboard. For a moment, Tom chuckled, expecting Lisa to pop up and laugh it off. However, when Lisa resurfaced, her face showed shock and annoyance. She trod the water and shouted at Tom, but he could tell she wasn't mad. He extended a hand to help her back on the boat, still grinning. Then everything changed in an instant. The serene blue of the water suddenly turned dark as a massive shadow moved beneath the surface. Tom's smile vanished as he saw a huge dorsal fin slicing through the water toward Lisa. His heart pounded in his chest and panic set in. Lisa's eyes widened with terror as she saw the fin too. She frantically tried to swim towards the boat, but the great white shark was too fast. In a horrifying moment, the shark lunged at Lisa, dragging her underwater. The sea turned red with blood as Tom watched in helpless horror. Tom screamed, reaching out into the water. He grabbed a nearby rope and threw it toward Lisa, but it was too late. The shark was relentless, and Tom's desperate attempts to save her were futile. Tom felt an overwhelming sense of guilt and terror. He had only meant to play a harmless prank, but now his beloved wife was in danger because of him. He could barely breathe as he saw the shark thrashing in the water, Lisa's screams piercing the air. In his frantic state, Tom tried everything he could to fend off the shark. He grabbed an oar and began hitting the water, shouting and trying to scare the predator away. But the shark was relentless, its mighty jaws clamping down on Lisa with deadly force. Tom's eyes filled with tears as he realized the gravity of his mistake. The playful mood was gone, replaced by a nightmare he couldn't escape. He could hear Lisa's cries for help, and it tore him apart that he couldn't do more to save her. The scene was a blur of red water, thrashing fins, and desperate screams. Finally, the shark disappeared into the depths, leaving behind a trail of blood. Shaking and sobbing, Tom pulled the rope back into the boat, but Lisa was gone. The water around him was eerily calm again, but Tom knew his life would never be the same. The sunny afternoon had turned into a scene of horror and loss. Tom's prank had gone wrong, leaving him with a haunting guilt that would never fade. The boat rocked gently on the waves, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Tom's heart. Desperately, Tom grabbed the radio and called for help, his voice cracking with anguish as he repeated his plea. He identified his boat, Seabreeze, and explained that a shark had attacked his wife, urgently requesting assistance. The Coast Guard responded quickly, assuring Tom they were coming. He clung to the hope that somehow they could save Lisa. But deep down, he knew the truth. The blood in the water and the severity of the attack left little room for hope. Minutes felt like hours as Tom waited, staring at where Lisa had disappeared. He replayed the events repeatedly in his mind, wishing he could turn back time. The sound of approaching boats broke his trance. The Coast Guard arrived, and a team of divers quickly prepared to search the area. Tom watched helplessly as the divers dove into the water. Every second felt like an eternity. He prayed silently, begging for a miracle. The divers searched diligently, but after what seemed like forever, they surfaced with grim expressions. One of them approached Tom, shaking his head, conveying the heartbreaking news without words. Tom's heart shattered. The reality of Lisa's death hit him like a tidal wave. He fell to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. The Coast Guard crew tried to console him, but their words were lost in the sea of his grief. Tom couldn't stop thinking about how his innocent prank had led to such a tragic end. The boat ride back to shore was a blur. Tom sat silently, staring at the horizon, lost in his thoughts. The once beautiful coast of Gansby now seemed like a place of horror and loss. When they reached the dock, Tom was met by local authorities who gently escorted him to a nearby station to take his statement. In the following days, Tom couldn't escape the nightmare that haunted him. He stayed at a small hotel, unable to return to the home he had shared with Lisa. The town of Gansby, once a place of joy and love, had constantly reminded him of his fatal mistake. News of the incident spread quickly, and Tom found himself under intense scrutiny. Some people offered sympathy, but others blamed him for what had happened. The guilt weighed heavily on his shoulders, and he struggled to find a way to cope with his loss. Tom decided to seek therapy, hoping to find some semblance of peace. His therapist, Dr. Melanie Brooks, listened patiently as he recounted the tragic events. She encouraged him to express his feelings and to find ways to honor Lisa's memory. With time, Tom began to channel his grief into something positive. He started a foundation in Lisa's name dedicated to shark conservation and safety awareness. He wanted to prevent others from experiencing the same tragedy. The foundation aimed to educate people about the dangers of the ocean and how to respect its inhabitants. Tom also began participating in community outreach programs, sharing his story in the hopes that it would serve as a cautionary tale. He wanted people to understand the importance of taking safety seriously and being aware of their surroundings. Though the pain of losing Lisa never indeed went away, Tom found solace in helping others. He dedicated his life to making a difference, turning his grief into a force for good. The foundation grew and Tom found a new purpose, keeping Lisa's memory alive through his work. Years later, standing on the shore of Gansby, Tom looked out at the ocean with a heavy heart. The water was calm and beautiful, but he knew its power too well. He whispered a silent prayer for Lisa, hoping she had found peace. That sunny afternoon changed Tom's life forever, but he had learned to live with his loss. He knew Lisa would always be a part of him, guiding him as he worked to make the world. Autumn of 1995, adventurer Sarah Mitchell explored the remote rivers of the Australian outback. The Ord River in Western Australia was known for its rugged beauty and diverse wildlife. An experienced explorer, Sarah was eager to document the untouched wilderness and its inhabitants. Early one morning, Sarah set off in her canoe, paddling through the calm waters of the Ord River. The scenery was breathtaking, with towering eucalyptus trees lining the banks and the calls of exotic birds echoing in the distance. Sarah felt a deep connection with nature and enjoyed the moment's serenity. Sarah's senses were alert as she navigated through a narrow river passage. She knew the region was home to the most dangerous predator in Australia, the giant saltwater crocodile. She had read about their immense power and cunning behavior and was cautious but confident in her abilities. Without warning, the water around her canoe exploded. Hidden beneath the surface, a massive saltwater crocodile surged upwards and slammed into her canoe. The sudden and violent impact sent Sarah and her canoe into the air before crashing back into the water. Disoriented and gasping for breath, Sarah found herself thrown into the murky river. Her canoe was overturned and her gear was scattered. Panic set in as she realized the danger she was in. The crocodile, a monstrous reptile with powerful jaws, was now in the water with her. Sarah's training kicked in. She knew she had to stay calm and think fast. She kicked her legs, trying to distance herself from the crocodile. The ancient beast, however, was relentless. It circled her, its cold, calculating eyes fixed on its prey. The water was thick with vegetation, making it hard to see. Sarah scanned her surroundings, looking for anything that could help her. She spotted a fallen tree branch floating nearby. Grabbing it, she used it to keep herself afloat and to fend off the crocodile's attacks. The crocodile lunged at her, its jaws snapping dangerously close. Sarah pushed the branch towards its snout, trying to keep it at bay. The crocodile was mighty, and she could feel the pressure of its bite through the branch. She had to find a way to escape before her strength gave out. Sarah's heart pounded as she struggled to keep the crocodile at bay with the branch. The reptile's eyes remained locked on her, its mighty jaws ready to snap shut. She knew she couldn't hold it off for long. Her muscles ached and the cold water sapped her strength. In a moment of clarity, Sarah remembered a survival tactic she had learned during her training. Crocodiles were fast in short bursts but slower when maneuvering around obstacles. She scanned the riverbank and spotted a cluster of large boulders partially submerged. If she could reach them, she could outmaneuver the crocodile. Summoning her remaining strength, Sarah kicked hard and swam towards the boulders, the branch still in her grasp. The crocodile lunged again, but she pushed its snout away just in time. She felt the rush of water as the beast thrashed behind her, but she kept moving, her eyes fixed on the rocks ahead. Reaching the boulders, Sarah scrambled onto the largest one, pulling herself out of the water. She gasped for breath, her body trembling with exhaustion. The crocodile circled below, frustrated by the barrier. Sarah knew she had a brief time window to plan her next move. She spotted a narrow path along the rocky riverbank that led up to the higher ground. It was her best chance of escaping the crocodile's reach. Carefully, she climbed from boulder to boulder, using her hands and feet to grip the slippery surfaces. The crocodile snapped at her heels, but the rocks slowed it down, giving her a slight advantage. Finally, Sarah reached the top of the riverbank. She collapsed onto the dry ground, her chest heaving. She looked back to see the crocodile retreating into the water, its eyes still watching her. She had made it to safety, but knew she couldn't let her guard down yet. Gathering her strength, Sarah stood up and began the trek back to her campsite. Her clothes were soaked, and she shivered in the cool air. Every step was a reminder of the close call she had just experienced. She moved quickly, determined to distance herself from the river as much as possible. Back at her campsite, Sarah immediately checked her supplies and equipment. She had lost some gear, but she was thankful to be alive. She radioed for help, informing her team of the encounter and her location. They assured her they were on their way. As she waited for her team to arrive, Sarah reflected on the harrowing experience. The Australian outback had proven to be as dangerous as it was beautiful. She knew she had been lucky to survive the encounter with the crocodile, and the ordeal had taught her valuable lessons about respect and caution in the wild. When her team finally arrived, they helped her pack up and escorted her to safety. Sarah's adventure in the Ord River had come to a dramatic and terrifying end. Still, she knew it was a story she would carry forever. The experience tested her limits and reaffirmed her passion for exploring the world's most remote places. As they drove away from the river, Sarah looked at the landscape. Despite the danger, she felt a deep connection to the wild beauty of the outback. She knew she would return someday, better prepared and ever mindful of the ancient predators that called it home. It was a warm, quiet morning on August 12, 2001 in Boca Palms, a small coastal town in Florida. The beaches were mostly empty at this hour, with the sun just beginning to rise. For Eric Taylor, a 33-year-old local, this was his favorite time to swim. The water was calm, the air cool, and he enjoyed the peaceful solitude before the beach filled with people. Over the years, he had made this early morning dip a routine, often swimming alone in the shallow waters just off the coast. Eric parked his car and walked down the beach, feeling the sand between his toes as he headed toward the water. He wasn't a competitive swimmer, but strong and confident in the ocean. He had grown up by the beach, and the sea was like a second home. He waded into the water, sighing as the coolness refreshed him from the heat. There was no wind, no signs of danger, just the endless stretch of water inviting him farther out. Florida's waters were home to many sharks, though attacks were rare. Lemon sharks frequented these waters and were usually non-aggressive and avoided human contact, but they were also territorial. Lemon sharks were often hunted in the shallow waters where Eric was now swimming. Though they were not typically a threat, their powerful jaws could cause serious harm if provoked or threatened. As Eric swam out farther, unaware of the potential danger, he focused on his strokes, gliding smoothly through the water. He had the whole ocean to himself, or so he thought. The lemon shark lurking nearby, invisible beneath the surface, wasn't initially interested in attacking. It was simply moving through its territory, keeping to itself. But the swimmer's presence had caught its attention. Sharks, like many creatures of the sea, react based on instinct, and in this moment, the shark saw Eric as a possible threat to its space. The morning sun reflected on the water as Eric turned onto his back, floating momentarily to enjoy the stillness. His eyes closed, lost in the rhythm of the ocean's movement. He felt safe, unaware that the lemon shark was getting closer just below him, circling slowly, its dark silhouette blending with the sea floor. The sudden force hit Eric before he could even process what was happening. A sharp pain shot through his right leg as something latched onto him with crushing force. His body stiffened, and his instincts kicked in. This was no wave or cramp. It was something alive, powerful, and dangerous. As he twisted in the water, Eric saw the large, unmistakable shape of a lemon shark, its teeth buried deep into his leg. The pain was unbearable, a burning sensation as the shark's jaws tightened. Eric's scream through the ocean's vastness swallowed the sound. He flailed in the water, trying to break free, but the shark wasn't letting go. Its grip was firm, dragging him under as it thrashed, its powerful body moving with terrifying speed. Desperation took over as Eric punched and kicked at the shark with everything he had. His fists slammed into the shark's snout, a spot he knew could be sensitive. And for a brief second, the shark released him. Blood filled the water around him, and Eric's vision blurred as he tried to swim away, his legs searing with pain. But before he could get far, the shark returned, its predatory instincts kicking in as it closed in for another attack. The shark's teeth grazed his thigh this time, slicing through flesh but not clamping down as hard. Eric kicked out again, his foot connecting with the shark's side, pushing it away just enough to give him a chance to escape. His arms and legs moved frantically, pulling him toward the shore, the taste of salt water and blood heavy in his mouth. He could see the beach now, but it seemed impossibly far as the panic and pain coursed through his body. On the beach, a few early risers had noticed the commotion. A woman walking her dog had seen the splashing and the unusual movements in the water. Realizing something was wrong, she began shouting for help. Another man, a jogger, sprinted toward the water, knowing that whoever was out there didn't have much time. Eric's strength was fading fast. His leg felt on fire, and every stroke was a battle to keep himself afloat. He glanced back, fearing the shark would come for him again. But for now, it had disappeared into the depths. He didn't know if it would return, but he had no time to think about it. His only focus was on reaching the shore. When Eric finally felt the sand beneath his hands, he collapsed onto the beach, gasping for air. His leg was mangled, blood pouring from the deep gashes where the shark had bitten him. The jogger and the woman rushed to his side, frantically calling for an ambulance. Eric's body trembled as the shock began to set in, his mind racing as he replayed the attack in his head, trying to make sense of it. As the beach filled with onlookers, many stood in stunned silence, staring at the blood-streaked water where the shark had attacked. They couldn't believe what had just happened. For Eric, the physical pain was overwhelming, but the mental scars would last far longer. The ocean, once a place of peace for him, had become a nightmare in seconds. Eric survived the attack, but his leg would never fully heal, the bite leaving deep scars both on his skin and in his memory. He would later tell the story of that day, describing the terror he felt as the shark dragged him under and his helplessness in the face of such a powerful predator. The waters of Boca Palms remained beautiful, but for Eric, they always reminded him of how quickly nature could turn on you. He never swam alone again. It started like any other for Simon Garrett, a professional diver with years of experience exploring the Great Barrier Reef. It was April 14, 2007, and Simon was alone, investigating a remote section of the reef known for its deep caves and narrow passages. The Great Barrier Reef, located off the northeastern coast of Australia, was one of the most breathtaking places Simon had ever dived. He had spent hours navigating its coral gardens and underwater tunnels, fascinated by the marine life that thrived there. On this particular day, Simon had chosen a new spot that he hadn't explored before. It was deeper, more isolated, and less frequented by tourists. The water was calm, and conditions were perfect for a long, quiet dive. Simon checked his gear, adjusted his mask, and descended into the blue. The familiar sensation of weightlessness took over as he swam downward. His air tank was full, and his dive computer showed plenty of time for exploration. He had always felt at peace in the water. The reef was like a second home to him, and Simon was confident in his abilities. His goal for the day was to explore a cave system hidden beneath layers of coral, rumored to be full of beautiful, untouched marine life. He ventured deeper, his flashlight cutting through the shadows as he entered the first tunnel. The coral walls shimmered, and schools of fish darted around him, making the cave come alive with movement. As Simon moved through the narrow passages, he took in the beauty of the place, losing track of time. Everything felt routine until he noticed something in the distance. A dark shape moved in the shadows ahead, just on the edge of his flashlight's beam. At first, Simon thought it might be a large fish or a stingray, but as he swam closer, he realized what it was. A reef shark resting in the narrow space, hidden among the coral. Reef sharks were common in the Great Barrier Reef. Unlike the more aggressive bull or tiger sharks, reef sharks were usually shy, often keeping their distance from divers. But they were also territorial, especially when disturbed in confined spaces like the cave Simon was now swimming through. Simon froze, his heart racing as the shark stirred, its sleek body shifting slightly in the tight space. The shark had been unaware of Simon's presence until now, but the disturbance was enough to set it on edge. The shark's movements became quicker, more erratic, and Simon knew he had to tread carefully. In the narrow confines of the cave, there was little room for error, and the shark now blocked the only exit. Simon's mind raced as he tried to stay calm. He knew sudden movements could provoke the shark. There was no way to swim around it in such a tight space. The shark turned slowly, its dark eyes fixed on Simon. It was a large one, at least 6 feet long, and its powerful body moved with grace, sending a wave of fear through him. Then, without warning, the shark charged. It moved with terrifying speed, its body slicing through the water toward Simon. He barely had time to react, pulling himself back against the cave wall, his heart pounding in his chest. The shark rushed past him so close he could feel the force of its movement. It didn't strike him, but its behavior was clear. It felt threatened, and Simon was trapped in its territory. The shark circled back, slower this time but still agitated. Simon's breathing became shallow as he tried to control his panic. His air supply was ticking down, and he knew he couldn't stay in the cave much longer. He had to find a way out before the shark attacked again. His spear gun, which he always carried for protection, was strapped to his side, but using it in such close quarters could provoke the shark further. Simon decided it was a last resort. The shark circled once more, its body gliding just inches from Simon as it passed. It was watching him, testing him, and Simon knew that any wrong move could trigger another charge. He slowly reached for his spear gun, keeping his movements as controlled as possible. The shark stopped circling, hovering before the exit, blocking his only way out. Simon's breathing became more rapid as the tension mounted. He was running out of options, and the shark wasn't moving. If he didn't act soon, he'd be out of the air with no clear escape. Taking a deep breath, Simon made his move. He pushed off the cave wall with a quick burst of energy, swimming toward the shark, hoping to spook it without forcing a confrontation. The shark reacted instantly, turning toward Simon with lightning speed, but instead of charging again, it darted away, its powerful body disappearing into the deeper water beyond the cave. Simon didn't waste a second. He swam as fast as he could toward the exit, his lungs burning as he kicked hard, pulling himself through the narrow opening. Once free from the cave, Simon ascended quickly, his chest tightening as his air supply dwindled. He broke the surface with a gasp, his body trembling from the adrenaline and the fear of what had just happened. The open water felt like a refuge, and he floated on his back momentarily, catching his breath and trying to process the terrifying encounter. Back on the boat, Simon sat quietly, replaying the event in his mind. He had come face to face with a reef shark in one of the most confined and dangerous situations imaginable, and lived to tell the tale. With all its beauty and wonder, the Great Barrier Reef also showed Simon how quickly things could go wrong. The ocean was a place he loved, but it was clear to him now that it held dangers he would never fully control. The annual surf competition in South Africa was underway on a sunny, bright day in 2006. As surfers displayed their skills, the beach was lined up with spectators. Their cheers filled the air. Emily Harris, 20, is a rising surfing star known for her fearless spirit and bold maneuvers. The atmosphere was electric as each surfer pushed themselves to the limit to impress the judges. Emily was next. Her heart pounded with excitement and nervousness as she paddled into the lineup. She waited patiently for the perfect wave. The announcer's voice cracked over the loudspeaker with a tone of urgency. "Attention, spectators and surfers. Satellite images just revealed a massive rogue swell approaching from the southeast. Please prepare yourself for possible evacuation." The horizon darkened before anyone could react as the massive wave inched closer, increasing with each passing second. As surfers paddled frantically towards the shore, Emily was caught in the swiftly approaching wave. The rogue wave swept Emily and her board in a swirling water storm. The force of the waves disoriented her and she struggled to keep her bearings. Emily surfaced, gasping for breath when the wave receded. Her board was still attached to her ankle with the safety leash. Emily realized she was far from the competition zone as she wiped salt water from her eyes. She could not hear the cheers or announcements from the crowd. The coast was just a faint line in the distance. She floated alone in the vast ocean. Emily, trying to remain calm, scanned the area. She was horrified to discover that she had entered a shark feeding area. The water was darker and signs of a sudden drop on the ocean bottom were visible through the clear waters. She was horrified as she recalled the stories about great whites patrolling this area. She floated in the water, waiting for assistance to arrive. A dark shape caught her attention. Untethered, a large fin cut through the surface of the water. The great white shark was now in her midst, probably attracted by the commotion of the waves. Emily's training kicked into gear. She knew that sudden movements could trigger an attack. She used her hands to stabilize her position gently and measured her movements. Emily knew the chaos caused by the rogue waves would delay rescue, so she knew she needed to use her surfing skills and wits to survive. She placed her board to be as visible from the air as possible while watching the shark's movements. She prayed for help as each pass felt like an eternity. The situation was grave. Emily was alone, far from safety and surrounded by an infinite sea. Her life hung in the balance when she faced the ocean's most formidable predator. Emily's challenge was to survive the shark and maintain hope and courage despite overwhelming fear. Her mind was racing with solutions. She remembered that she had read that keeping eye contact with the shark can sometimes deter them since they are used to attacking unwitting prey. In this light, she kept her gaze on the shark and made herself as large as possible on her board. After the initial shock of being alone began to fade, her skills as a surfer became more apparent. Emily used her water current knowledge to subtly and slowly maneuver her board toward a nearby coral reef she had previously noticed. The reef could provide some shelter, making it more difficult for the sharks to approach. The sun started sinking towards the horizon, casting a golden glow on the water. The beauty of that moment contrasted with the terror she felt. Emily was a mixture of fear and awe, with her life hanging in the balance between both. She heard the distant hum from an engine. She squinted in the sun, trying to find the source. The rescue jet ski was part of the safety crew for the competition, and it was speeding toward her. Emily waved her hands frantically to get the driver's notice while still keeping an eye on that shark. The jet ski driver navigated the turbulent waters with ease. Emily saw the relief in the eyes of the rescuer as he approached, a reflection of her relief. He shouted above the engine's roar, assuring her they would get her out of the situation. Considering the shark's proximity, Emily carefully shifted weight to get on the jet ski. He helped her to the surface with a firm but reassuring grip. She had barely settled behind him when he began to accelerate away, his powerful engine cutting the waves on their return. Emily could feel the tension leaving her body as the shore approached. As they saw Emily safely return, the crowd gathered on the beach cheered. Her competitors ran to her and greeted her with relief and admiration. Emily's gratitude was overwhelmed when she finally reached solid ground. The sun was setting, and the colors of the sky were orange and purple. Emily turned back to the ocean. It was the most terrifying experience of her life. But it also reinforced her awe and respect for the sea, a powerful, unpredictable force. Emily's story quickly spread that night as the competition ended and participants celebrated. It was a testament to Emily's courage and her survival. She understood that the ocean was a constant in her life and the need to respect it. Her encounter with the white shark will forever serve as a reminder of how thin the line is between adventure and danger. Waters off Durban's South Africa coast had always been a favorite spot for seasoned spearfisher Paul Mitchell. On March 18, 2003, Paul, a 35-year-old with over a decade of spearfishing experience, was preparing for what he expected to be a successful day in the ocean. The South African coastline, known for its rich marine life, was home to an array of fish species and, as every diver knew, some of the ocean's largest predators. But Paul was confident, skilled, and had faced his share of close encounters. That day, he was accompanied by his longtime friend and fellow spearfisher, Greg Ellis. The two had been diving together for years, relying on each other for safety in deeper waters. Paul was the more experienced of the two, but Greg had learned quickly, becoming a strong partner on these trips. Their plan for the day was simple: dive deep, target larger fish, and return with a solid catch before the afternoon heat kicked in. The sun was already rising when they reached their favorite dive spot. The water was clear, with perfect visibility and mild currents. They geared up, adjusted their weight belts, checked their spears, and descended into the water. Paul led the way, his body moving effortlessly through the depths, the spear gun ready. His heart raced with the familiar thrill of the dive, and his mind focused on the task. Paul had chosen this spot because it was known for its rich population of game fish, particularly yellowfin tuna. The deeper waters here could be challenging, but they had always yielded good results, and today they seemed the same. As they descended, fish darted in and out of view, their bodies reflecting the light filtering through the water. After a few minutes of scouting, Paul spotted his target, a large tuna hovering just above the seabed. He signaled to Greg to stay back as he slowly raised his spear gun. The shot was perfect. The spear pierced the fish cleanly, and Paul felt the familiar tug as the fish tried to escape. Blood immediately spilled into the water, spreading quickly as Paul began pulling the catch toward him. His adrenaline spiked, the satisfaction of the perfect shot filling him with confidence. But beneath the surface, the ocean's predators were already responding to the scent of blood. Durban's waters were home to various shark species, and tiger sharks were among the most feared. Known for their size, strength, and aggression, tiger sharks were opportunistic hunters, attracted by movement and the scent of blood in the water. Paul had always respected the dangers of these waters, but today, the reality of the threat was about to become far more personal. As Paul wrestled with the tuna, he didn't notice the dark shape gliding silently through the water. The tiger shark had been lurking nearby, drawn by the blood cloud from Paul's recent kill. Its senses were finely tuned, detecting the slightest disturbance. And now, it was closing in. Paul felt a shift in the water before he saw the shark. A powerful current surged past him, and he instinctively looked around, his heart skipping a beat as his eyes locked onto the unmistakable silhouette of a tiger shark. It was massive, easily over 12 feet long and heading straight for him. Panic gripped him momentarily, but his years of training kicked in. He knew exactly what to do. He released the line from his spear gun, letting the tuna drift away as a distraction. But the shark wasn't interested in the fish. It was focused on Paul, sensing both the blood and the movements of a new target. Paul's hand tightened around his spear as he began his ascent, kicking hard toward the surface, but he could feel the shark getting closer, its massive body slicing through the water with terrifying speed. Paul's mind raced. He knew the tiger shark was not a creature that would scare off easily. It was known for its persistence, especially once it had locked onto prey. He turned to face the shark, holding the spear gun out in front of him as a makeshift shield. The shark came in fast, its wide mouth lined with rows of sharp teeth visible as it closed the distance. With a sudden jolt, the shark struck. Its powerful head slammed into Paul, knocking him backward. The force of the impact sent him spiraling through the water, but he managed to keep hold of his spear gun. He kicked out, trying to distance himself, but the shark was relentless. It circled back, faster now, its eyes locked onto him as it prepared for another strike. Paul knew he had to act quickly. He aimed the spear gun at the shark's head, waiting for the right moment. As the shark lunged again, he fired. The spear struck just below its eye, not deep enough to kill, but enough to startle it. The shark thrashed, violently shaking its massive head. The spear lodged in its tough skin. Blood mixed with the water as the shark pulled back, disoriented for a moment. Paul didn't wait to see if the shot had done any lasting damage. He kicked upward with everything he had, his lungs burning as he raced toward the surface. The shark, though injured, wasn't giving up. It circled beneath him, slower now, but still dangerous. Paul could feel the water moving as the shark swam below him, and he knew it was only a matter of time before it attacked again. Greg was already there as he broke the surface, gasping for air, pulling him toward the boat. Paul scrambled aboard, his body shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. They watched in horror as the shark's dorsal fin broke the surface, circling the boat for several more minutes before disappearing into the depths. Paul collapsed onto the deck, his breathing heavy, his heart racing. The close encounter had shaken him to his core. In all his years of spearfishing, he had never come face to face with such danger. The tiger shark had been relentless, and Paul knew he had been lucky to escape with his life. In 2002, experienced free divers Jack Thompson and Maya Collins were gearing up for a remarkable underwater adventure in the serene waters of Hanauma Bay. With their extensive preparation, they were poised to explore the vibrant marine life in one of the most beautiful snorkeling spots in the world. Jack and Maya decided to indulge in their diving passion at Hanauma Bay. The bay is known for its beautiful coral formations, as well as an abundance of marine wildlife. After securing their masks and fins, they checked their belt-mounted air tanks explicitly designed for free diving. The tanks were designed to provide just enough air for quick dives, but they had to be careful with their use. As they entered the crystal-clear waters, their world changed. The noise of the beach ceased to exist and was replaced by their rhythmic breathing and distant sounds from underwater creatures. Corals spread beneath them like an alien landscape, vibrant with color and alive with life. Jack took the lead, and his confidence in navigating such an environment was evident in his strokes. Maya was close behind, wide-eyed with amazement as she watched the colorful fish dart between the corals, while the sea turtles glided past. The dive was tranquil and mesmerizing. As they swam deeper, they followed a school's bright yellow tangs and unknowingly reached a less traveled reef area. The water became more relaxed and the corals sparser. An ominous feeling began to settle on them. Jack abruptly stopped as he rounded a corner in the maze of coral. Maya nearly bumped into him. They saw dozens of juvenile sharks in the coral bushes and rocky crevices. Their sleek bodies blended into the sand. It was a nursery for sharks. Jack and Maya exchanged worried looks. They were aware that they had stumbled upon a shark nursery. Mother sharks would have been nearby and in a territory that could have been seen as a threat to the young. A shadow hovered over them as they considered their next move. A large female, probably a mother shark, slowly circled, her movements deliberate and cautious. Jack and Maya were still aware that sudden movement could trigger an attack. They watched as the shark's eyes seemed to assess their every move. Jack pointed to a narrow coral passage, realizing they were in danger. This was their best opportunity to make a quiet retreat. The sharks were on guard and needed to find a way back without causing any more alarm. They began carefully escaping, taking slow, measured breaths to conserve their air supply. Each move was calculated to be as non-threatening as possible. The mother shark circled, her presence constantly reminding them that they were in danger. The urgency of the situation increased as they navigated through the coral corridors. Their air supply was limited, and due to their depth and the complexity of the coral surrounding them, they needed help to reach the surface. Each second spent underwater increased the risk. Their escape became more than a matter of stealth but also survival. They moved like shadows, barely stirring the water, focusing on finding safety. The reef's beauty, once mesmerizing, was now a labyrinth that held them in its silent depths. The shark mother's looming presence remained a constant danger as Jack and Maya navigated cautiously through the coral maze. The passageway was twisted, with its openings decorated with sea anemones. Its branches of coral were also sharp. The divers had to be careful not to harm themselves or the marine life. As their air supply was dwindling between them, tension grew. Every breath they took felt like a clock ticking down their remaining minutes. Maya looked at her gauge and saw that it was dangerously close. She then glanced over to Jack, who seemed to be worried. Jack, who was aware of the urgency, took the lead. His eyes scanned for a safe route that could offer a rapid ascent without further alarming the shark. He remembered an area of the reef they had explored earlier, which might provide a safer route to the surface. He firmly motioned to Maya, telling her to follow him towards a less dense part of the reef, where the water was more apparent and the ascent easier. Sensing their movements, the mother shark increased her vigilance. Her passes became closer and her circling tighter. The shadows cast by the sun overhead on the water alerted her to the presence of the two. Jack and Maya would freeze each time she came near, holding their breath and minimizing their movement until she passed. As they neared the edge of the coral reef, the open ocean beckoned. Jack spotted a column of clear water in the distance, noticeably less populated with marine life, offering an ideal path for a discreet ascent. He checked his remaining breath, barely enough for the effort. Exchanging a reassuring smile with Maya, they both understood the urgency. It was now or never for their ascent to the surface. They seized the opportunity when they saw that the shark was temporarily hidden behind a large coral outcropping. They began their ascent by pushing off from the coral as quietly as possible. Each meter of ascent felt like a struggle, and their lungs were aching for more air. A sudden movement caught the peripheral vision of both halfway up. As the mother shark became aware of their escape from her, she accelerated towards them. Jack's grip was firm as he reached out to Maya and calmed her down. They increased their speed, their bodies streamlined to the resistance of the water. The last few meters were the most terrifying. Above them, the surface shone like a promise of safety. They were desperate for air, and their bodies were urging them to break the surface. But they knew that it was not a good idea to surface too soon for fear of decompression illness. Relief was palpable as they finally broke the water's surface, gasping for breath. The masks were removed and their faces were bathed by sunlight. They looked around. After the ordeal, they could now see the shore. It was a comforting sight. The two slowly approached it, still being cautious. Jack and Maya collapsed on the sand once they reached the shore. Their bodies were exhausted, but their minds were racing with adrenaline. Their eyes were filled with relief, fear, and a newfound appreciation for nature's power. The dive began as an exploration into beauty, but ended in a desperate struggle for survival. They knew that they would dive again, but only with a greater appreciation of the ecosystems and inhabitants of the ocean. They were not only escaping the shark, but also from their complacency when faced with nature's silent and imposing depths. Michael Turner paddled gently through the calm, icy water as the sun sank behind the rugged mountains in a remote bay of Alaska. The tranquil environment, with its vast stretches of water, dense forests, and occasional cries of an eagle in the distance, offered the perfect escape to the bustle of city life. Michael, a keen outdoorsman, enjoyed these solo trips. He felt a connection to nature and peace that he couldn't find anywhere else. The bay was known for its wildlife and breathtaking views, but it was remarkably tranquil as dusk approached. Night slowly approached as the sky painted itself in shades of orange and lavender. Michael watched the seabirds dive for their food and observed the salmon leaping in the air. He was so engrossed in his surroundings that he forgot about the dangers lurking beneath the surface. This bay in the north was cold and deep. It is home to many marine species, including sharks. Shark encounters are rare, but salmon and other fish can attract curious predators to the shore. Michael was lost in his thoughts and shocked when his kayak suddenly shook. The impact was powerful enough to cause the kayak to tip dangerously one way. He was thrown into the freezing waters before he had time to react. Gasping with shock from the cold water, Michael struggled to find his way. His heart began to pound as he realized how serious his situation was. He was trapped in icy waters with his kayak flipped over beside him. Michael struggled against the cold and the panic that was building. Still, he managed to get up, holding on to the kayak's overturned hull. The dim light made it difficult to see what hit him. The dark figure was a shark. Its dorsal blade cut through the water's surface before disappearing. A wave of fear swept through Michael when he realized that there was a shark nearby. Michael was under time pressure to take action. The cold water was sapping Michael's strength, and nightfall only made his situation more dangerous. He reached out for the kayak with trembling hands and tried to correct it. He was clumsy and frightened, his movements splashing water in the process. Michael's thoughts raced while he worked. Michael knew remaining calm was essential. Any frantic movement could trigger a more aggressive reaction from the shark. Now his survival depended on the ability to think clearly and to paddle safely to shore before the shark turned his curiosity into a hunting expedition. Michael's fingers were numb from the cold, and he gripped the kayak as it flipped over. His breaths were short and ragged. Michael's energy was dwindling with each attempt to turn the kayak around. But he knew that he could not stop. The shark was a constant reminder to him of the danger he faced. Michael used his last bit of strength to push the kayak. It began to slowly turn around, with water pouring down its hull. He steadied his kayak with his hand, careful not to create any more splashes that might draw the shark to him. Michael stopped paddling the kayak once it was stable. He took a breather and tried to calm down his racing heart. He strained his eyes to look for the fin in the darkness. The silence was deafening, only broken by the lapping water and his heavy breathing. The shark appeared to have vanished momentarily, giving him an opportunity. He carefully positioned himself to climb into the kayak. He was careful to move slowly and deliberately, balancing caution and haste. He sat down in the kayak and let relief wash over his body. However, he was still aware of how dangerous it could be. Michael looked at the horizon to find the closest point of land. In the dimming light, the shore appeared far away, but he couldn't help himself. He grabbed his paddle, which was floating nearby, and started paddling as hard as possible. The fear and adrenaline that fueled each stroke kept his eyes darting about, looking for the shark. As he paddled, the sky darkened more, and stars began to illuminate the twilight. As the temperature dropped, his bones became even more chilled. Michael's training told him to keep a steady pace and conserve energy to avoid capsizing. The dark form of the shark suddenly reappeared and cut through the water parallel to his kayak. Michael's heart was pounding as he froze in mid-stroke. The shark was not charging, but its silent, close passes reminded Michael of its unpredictability and power. Michael knew that stopping was out of the question. He took a deep breath and resumed paddling. His strokes were even and controlled. His eyes were fixed on the dark waters. The shark circled, but slowly it lost interest. Its passes became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. The faint outline of the coast was visible after what seemed like an eternity. Michael felt more relief with every stroke that brought his boat closer to the shore. The sight of land gave him new energy. His body and mind were exhausted from tension. He finally reached the shallows and pulled himself and his kayak to the beach. He collapsed onto the sand and lay down, gazing at the sky and breathing heavily. He knew the danger was over, but would never forget what happened that night. Michael was sure he'd kayak again, but not without a newfound respect for the dangers lurking beneath the surface, even in the calmest waters. He had overcome one of his greatest fears tonight. The experience shook him, but it also made him more appreciative of the unpredictable and wild nature of the ocean. In the winter of 2000, adventure photographer Mark Evans found himself on the icy expanse of the Antarctic Peninsula. The stark, pristine beauty of the landscape was a dream come true for Mark, who had always been drawn to the world's most remote and challenging environments. His mission was to capture images of the unique wildlife in this frozen wilderness. Mark set out early one morning, the cold air biting his face as he trudged through the snow. He was particularly interested in photographing the seals often gathered on the ice floes. After hours of patient waiting, he finally spotted a group of seals basking in the weak sunlight on a large ice floe. Excited, Mark carefully approached the edge of the ice floe, setting up his camera and tripod with precision. Most indifferent to his presence, the seals continued to lounge and play. Mark snapped several photos, thrilled by the opportunity to capture these magnificent creatures in their natural habitat. Mark decided to move in a bit more to get a closer, more detailed shot. He edged forward cautiously, mindful of the fragile ice beneath his feet. As he focused his lens on a substantial male seal, he noticed the animal watching him intently. Mark clicked the shutter, the sound echoing in the still air. To his surprise, the large seal suddenly shifted its weight and began moving towards him. At first, Mark thought the seal was merely curious, but the animal's movements quickly became more aggressive. The seal lifted its head, letting out a deep, guttural growl that sent a shiver down Mark's spine. Before he could react, the seal charged, its powerful body sliding swiftly across the ice. Mark's heart raced as he realized the playful encounter had turned dangerous. He grabbed his camera and tripod, backing away quickly, but the seal was relentless. The ice beneath him cracked and shifted, making every step precarious. Mark's mind raced. He had to escape the seal's attacks and reach safety. But the vast expanse of ice and the frigid waters posed a severe challenge. The seal continued its pursuit, eyes fixed on Mark with territorial fury. Mark's heart pounded as he backed away from the charging seal. The ice beneath his feet creaked ominously, threatening to give way at any moment. He needed to stay calm and think quickly. The seal was powerful and fast, and the icy terrain was treacherous. He glanced around, searching for a way to escape. A nearby ice ridge offered a potential refuge. If he could climb it, the seal might not be able to follow. Clutching his camera and tripod, Mark dashed the ridge. The seal, sensing his movement, accelerated its pursuit. Mark reached the ice ridge and began to scramble up its slippery surface. His hands were numb from the cold, making it difficult to grip the ice. He could hear the seal's growls growing louder behind him, its frustration evident. With a final burst of effort, Mark hauled himself onto the top of the ridge and looked down. The seal lunged at the base of the ridge, its massive body unable to scale the steep incline. It thrashed and bellowed, its eyes locked onto Mark with unrelenting determination. Mark took a moment to catch his breath, his heart still racing. He knew he couldn't stay on the ridge forever. The cold was seeping into his bones, and he needed to find a way back to the safety of his camp. Mark spotted a series of ice floes leading back towards the shore. It would be a risky path, but it was his best chance. He carefully descended the ridge on the opposite side, keeping a wary eye on the seal, which was still trying to find a way to reach him. Mark hopped from one ice floe to the next, each step balancing speed and caution. Unable to follow directly, the seal swam through the icy water, trying to cut him off. Mark could feel the cold seeping through his boots and clothing, but he pushed on, driven by the need to escape. Finally, he reached a larger floe that connected to the shore. He scrambled onto it, his legs trembling with exhaustion. Realizing it had lost its prey, the seal let out a final, frustrated growl before retreating into the water. Mark collapsed onto the ice, breathing heavily and grateful to be alive. Once he had regained some strength, Mark made his way back to his camp. The experience had shaken him, but he knew he had a story to tell. He warmed himself by the fire and reviewed the photos on his camera. The images of the seals, including the aggressive male, were stunning. They captured the raw power and beauty of the Antarctic wildlife. Mark's adventure in Antarctica had taken a dangerous turn. Still, it also gave him a more profound respect for the animals and their environment. He knew he would be more cautious in the future, but he also knew he had captured something remarkable. The close encounter with the seal had been a reminder of the unpredictable nature of wildlife and the importance of respecting their territory. Mark felt a sense of accomplishment as he settled into his tent for the night. He had faced a life-threatening situation and survived. His photographs would share the story of the Antarctic seals, highlighting their majesty and the challenges they faced in their icy home. Gold Coast in Australia, known for its beautiful beaches and calm waters, was the perfect place for the McAllister family to celebrate their youngest son's birthday. It was January 17, 1995, a bright summer day, and the family had been looking forward to this day for months. The McAllisters, James, 42, his wife Sarah, 39, and their 3 children, Liam, 16, Megan, 14, and Oliver, who had just turned 9, had rented a small boat for the occasion. They planned to spend the day on the water, swimming, fishing, and relaxing. They had done this before, and the waters of the Gold Coast had always been a source of happiness and tranquility. The boat was small but perfect for a family outing. It had a small cabin and plenty of space to store their fishing gear and picnic supplies. The day had been filled with laughter as they sailed a few miles offshore, still within sight of the coast. Oliver, excited for his birthday, had caught his first fish, and the family had spent hours enjoying the sun and sea breeze. By mid-afternoon, they anchored the boat in a seemingly calm, shallow area to swim quickly before heading back to shore. The waters around Australia, particularly the Gold Coast, were known for great white sharks. These massive predators could reach up to 20 feet in length and were apex hunters, capable of sensing the slightest movement in the water from miles away. While attacks were rare, locals knew the risks, but the McAllisters, like many tourists, weren't overly concerned. The sun was bright, the sea was clear, and the water looked inviting. James had checked the depth and felt confident they were in safe territory. The family gathered on the deck, their voices rising excitedly as they prepared for one last swim before heading home. Liam and Megan were the first to dive into the water, splashing each other and laughing as Oliver waited for his dad to help him into the water. Watching from the boat, Sarah smiled at her children, content in the day's joy. Unbeknownst to them, far below the surface, a great white shark was prowling the waters, drawn by the vibrations of the family's playful splashing. It had been hunting along the coast, and now, sensing potential prey, it moved swiftly, its powerful body cutting through the depths. The shark was massive, nearly 18 feet long, with rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. It had detected the family from a distance and was now closing in. Without warning, the water around Liam suddenly erupted. One moment he was laughing with his sister. The next he was yanked beneath the surface. A flash of silver and white moved through the water and a scream pierced the air. Megan, just a few feet away, froze in horror as the dark shape of the great white shark became clear. James leaped into the water, frantically swimming toward Liam, who had surfaced briefly, blood streaming from a deep wound in his leg. But before James could reach him, the shark struck again, its massive jaws clamping down on Liam's torso, pulling him under. The water turned red as the shark thrashed violently, shaking its prey with incredible force. Panic swept over the family. Sarah screamed from the boat, trying to grab Oliver, who had been about to jump into the water, while Megan swam back toward the ship in terror, desperately trying to escape the carnage unfolding around her. But the shark wasn't finished. It turned toward Megan in a flash, its black eyes locking onto her. Before she could pull herself back onto the boat, the shark lunged, its powerful jaws catching her by the waist. Megan let out a scream, her hand slipping from the boat's edge as the shark dragged her into the depths. The water around her churned violently, and her small body was no match for the predator's strength. Blood filled the water once again as James tried to reach his daughter. But it was too late. Sarah clung to Oliver, who was now sobbing uncontrollably. His birthday joy turned into unimaginable horror. She watched helplessly as her husband, desperate to save his children, swam toward the chaos. But the shark was relentless. It came back for James, its speed and power overwhelming. With a single, brutal strike, it grabbed him by the legs, pulling him under just as it had done to Liam. The water frothed as the shark twisted and tore at James, his struggles weakening until they stopped. Now only Sarah and Oliver remained. The boat rocked as the shark circled, its dorsal fins slicing through the water, searching for its next target. Sarah knew they had to escape the water, but she was afraid. Her heart raced as she held onto her son, praying for a miracle. But the shark wasn't done. In one final, devastating attack, the shark rammed the side of the boat, knocking Sarah and Oliver into the water. The force of the impact left them disoriented, and the shark struck before Sarah could regain her bearings. Its jaws closed around her midsection, pulling her down with brutal force. Now floating helplessly nearby, Oliver screamed for his mother, but the shark quickly turned its attention to him. In an instant, it dragged him under, his small body disappearing beneath the bloodied sea. The Coast Guard, alerted by another nearby boat that had witnessed part of the attack, arrived minutes later. But by the time they reached the scene, the water was still. Only bits of debris and a red stain on the water remained as a silent testament to the unfolding carnage. They could do nothing when the Coast Guard pulled up to the wreckage. The shark had vanished, and the McAllisters were gone, devoured by the ocean's most fearsome predator. Only a few boat pieces remained, drifting aimlessly in the blood-streaked waters. The Gold Coast community was shocked and struggled to comprehend the tragedy. It was a reminder of the untamed power of the sea, where even a day of celebration could turn into a nightmare in a matter of moments. July 22, 2005, and the waters off the coast of Nassau, Bahamas, sparkled under the late morning sun. A group of eager tourists had signed up for a snorkeling trip, one of the highlights of any visit to the Bahamas, and the day had started perfectly. The tour group, led by 2 local guides, set out from a small marina on a Coral Dream boat bound for a popular snorkeling spot, known for its crystal-clear waters and abundant marine life. Among the tourists was 29-year-old David Carson, who was visiting from the U.S. with his fiancée, Emma Ward, to celebrate their engagement. It was supposed to be a day filled with beautiful memories. David was particularly excited. He had always been fascinated by the ocean, and the Bahamas was the perfect place to see some of its beauty up close. The couple had been looking forward to this trip for months, and everything about the day felt right. The guides had briefed the group on snorkeling safety, instructing them to stay together and avoid wandering too far from the boat. Bull sharks were known to frequent these waters, and while the chances of an attack were low, the guides emphasized the importance of sticking to the group. Bull sharks, notorious for their aggressive nature and ability to thrive in salt and fresh water, were often spotted around the Bahamas. Unlike other sharks, they could be unpredictable and were responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species. Their stocky build, powerful jaws, and strong swimming abilities made them particularly dangerous, especially when provoked or when food was scarce. As the boat anchored near a reef, the group eagerly jumped into the water, their snorkels and fins ready for the adventure. David and Emma were among the first to dive in, marveling at the bright coral and colorful fish that swarmed below. It felt surreal. Everything was peaceful, the ocean calm, and the group spread out around the reef, enjoying the underwater scenery. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. The group stayed relatively close, with the guides watching from the boat. But David, lost in the reef's beauty, and unaware of the increasing distance between him and the others, had unknowingly drifted away. Engrossed in watching a school of fish, Emma hadn't noticed David's slow separation from the group either. David continued exploring farther from the boat's safety and out of sight of the guides. His breathing through the snorkel was steady as he glided over the reef, unaware of the danger lurking nearby. The dark shape of a bull shark appeared below him, just beyond his line of sight. It had picked up on David's movements, drawn by his splashing and the unfamiliar presence in its territory. The shark began circling from a distance, watching David swam farther from the group, completely oblivious that he was being stalked. It happened in an instant. As David adjusted his mask, unaware of the predator below, the bull shark surged forward, propelled by its powerful tail. In the blink of an eye, the massive shark was upon him. David felt a sudden sharp pain in his right arm, and his body went rigid with shock. Looking down, he saw the terrifying sight of the bull shark's jaws clamped around his arm, its rows of razor-sharp teeth slicing through skin and muscle easily. Panic took over. David thrashed in the water, desperately trying to free himself, but the shark's grip was too strong. It pulled him under, the force of its bite dragging him beneath the surface. His lungs burned as he struggled to get free, the salt water filling his mouth as he fought to hold on to his breath. Blood clouded the water around him, feeding the shark's aggression. Still unaware of what had happened, Emma finally noticed that David was missing from the group. She lifted her head out of the water, scanning for him, and saw the thrashing in the distance. Panic seized her as she realized something was wrong. She called out to the guides, who immediately sprang into action, racing to get the boat closer to where David was struggling. Meanwhile, David was losing strength. The shark had let go of his arm but began circling him again, preparing for another strike. David, desperate and in excruciating pain, kicked out wildly, his mind racing with fear. He knew that if the shark attacked again, he might not survive. His arm was bleeding heavily, the pain nearly unbearable, but the adrenaline coursing through his body kept him moving. As the shark circled back, David grabbed the only thing he had, his snorkel. It was a weak defense, but at that moment, it was all he could think of. The shark charged again, its mouth wide open, but David struck it on the snout with the snorkel as hard as he could. Surprised by the sudden hit, the shark recoiled slightly but wasn't deterred for long. It circled again, this time closer, its eyes locked onto its target. By this time, the boat had reached David. Armed with a long pole, one of the guides leaned over the edge, shouting for David to swim toward them. The other guide grabbed a rope, ready to pull David aboard as soon as he was close enough. David, barely able to see through the blood and salt water in his eyes, kicked with every last bit of energy, his arm numb from the blood loss. The shark relentlessly followed closely behind, its dorsal fin cutting through the water as it prepared to strike again. Just as it closed in, the guide jabbed the shark with the pole, driving it back long enough for David to reach the side of the boat. The other guide pulled him aboard in one swift motion, and the group watched in stunned silence as the bull shark swam in circles below, still searching for its prey. David collapsed onto the deck, his body shaking from the shock and the pain. His arm was torn, the deep gashes from the shark's teeth a grim reminder of how close he had come to losing his life. Wide-eyed and silent, the rest of the tourists gathered around as the guides raced to stop the bleeding and radioed for emergency help. David would survive, but the scars, both physical and mental, would stay with him forever. The Bahamas, once a place of beauty and adventure, had shown its darker side, and David knew he would never forget the terror of staring into the eyes of a bull shark. In the summer of 2003, Dr. Rachel Carter was on a research expedition off the coast of the Lofoten Islands in Norway. A renowned marine biologist, Rachel had spent years studying orcas and their behaviors. This trip was memorable. She was observing a pod of orcas seen frequently in the area. The Lofoten Islands were breathtaking, with towering cliffs, deep fjords, and crystal-clear waters. Rachel and her team had set up their base on a research vessel named Arctic Explorer. They ventured into the cold waters daily, documenting the orcas and their interactions. One clear morning, Rachel decided to dive alone to get a closer look at the pod. She geared up, checked her equipment, and jumped into the chilly water. Her heart raced excitedly as she descended into the depths, surrounded by the stunning underwater landscape. The orcas were majestic creatures, gliding effortlessly through the water. Rachel marveled at their grace and intelligence. She watched as they communicated, their clicks and whistles echoing through the ocean. Everything seemed perfect, but suddenly, Rachel noticed a change in the orca's behavior. The pod had been playful and curious, but now they seemed agitated. She scanned the water, trying to understand what had caused the shift. Then she saw him, a large male orca separated from the pod, staring directly at her. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Rogue male orcas were known to be unpredictable and aggressive. She tried to remain calm, slowly backing away. But the orca was not deterred. He swam towards her rapidly, his black and white body cutting through the water like a torpedo. Panic set in. Rachel turned and swam as fast as she could, her legs propelling her through the water. She needed to reach the surface to signal her team for help, but the rogue orca was relentless. She felt the water churn behind her as he closed the distance. Rachel's mind raced with everything she had learned about orcas. She knew they were brilliant and could mimic human behavior. She tried to outsmart him, zigzagging through the water, hoping to confuse him. But the orca was a master of the ocean, matching her every move. In a desperate attempt, Rachel swam towards a nearby kelp forest. The thick strands of kelp might slow the orca down, giving her a chance to escape. She dove into the dense foliage, weaving through the green strands. The kelp wrapped around her, slowing her down, but she pushed on. She could feel the orca's presence behind her, the water vibrating with his powerful movements. Rachel's lungs burned, her air supply running low. She needed to find a way out, to reach the surface before it was too late. Finally, she saw a small opening in the kelp. She swam towards it, using the last of her strength. She broke through the kelp, emerging into a clear patch of water. But as she looked up, she saw the orca waiting for her, his dark eyes fixed on her. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest. She was trapped, with nowhere to go. She floated there, suspended in the cold, dark depths of the ocean, facing the intelligent and dangerous predator. Rachel's heart raced as she floated in the cold, dark water, staring at the rogue orca. She knew she had to stay calm and think fast. Her mind went over everything she knew about orcas, trying to find a way to outsmart the massive predator. The orca moved closer, and Rachel realized she couldn't outswim him. She had to use her knowledge and the environment to her advantage. She noticed a rocky outcrop nearby and swam towards it, hoping to find a small crevice where the orca couldn't follow. She reached the outcrop and found a narrow opening between two large rocks. Rachel squeezed through the gap, scraping her suit against the rough surface. She hid in the small space, her heart pounding in her ears. The orca circled the rocks, his large body unable to fit into the tight space. Rachel took a moment to catch her breath and think. She knew she couldn't stay there forever. Her air supply was limited, and she needed to return to the surface. She checked her dive watch and saw she had only a few minutes of air left. The orca seemed to lose interest momentarily, swimming away from the rocks. Rachel saw her chance. She slowly and quietly slipped out of her hiding spot, careful not to make sudden movements that might attract the orca's attention. She swam towards the surface, her movements controlled and deliberate. The water above her shimmered with sunlight, starkly contrasting the dark depths below. But just as she thought she was safe, she felt the water churn behind her. The orca had noticed her escape and was coming back. With a burst of speed, Rachel swam upwards, her lungs burning for air. She could see the surface getting closer and closer, but the orca was behind her. In a final desperate move, she grabbed her emergency flare gun from her belt and fired it toward the orca. The bright light and sudden noise startled the orca, causing him to veer off course. Rachel used the distraction to break through the surface, gasping for air. She waved frantically at her team on the Arctic Explorer, signaling for help. Her team saw her and quickly moved the boat towards her. They threw a lifeline and Rachel grabbed it, feeling relieved as they pulled her aboard. She collapsed on the deck, breathing heavily, her body trembling from the adrenaline and cold. The team didn't waste any time. They quickly gathered their equipment and returned to shore, leaving the dangerous waters behind. As the boat sped away, Rachel looked back at the ocean, the encounter with the orca etched in her memory. Back on land, Rachel received medical attention and was treated for exhaustion and minor injuries. The incident shook her profoundly and reinforced her respect for the ocean and its inhabitants. She knew she had been lucky to survive. In the weeks that followed, Rachel continued her research with renewed caution. She shared her story with her colleagues, emphasizing the importance of safety and awareness while studying marine life. The experience had been a harrowing reminder of the unpredictable nature of the ocean. Rachel's encounter with the rogue orca became a well-known story among marine biologists. It served as a testament to the intelligence and power of these magnificent creatures, and the need for respect and caution when venturing into their domain. Though the memory of the attack lingered, Rachel remained dedicated to her work. She knew understanding and protecting marine life was crucial, and she used her experience to advocate for safer research practices. The ocean was a place of wonder and danger. Rachel was determined to continue exploring its depths, armed with knowledge and respect. In the summer of 2024, marine biologist Dr. Alex Hayes embarked on a crucial research expedition in the waters of the Fiji Islands. Known for their vibrant coral reefs, the islands provided a perfect setting for Alex's study of the delicate underwater ecosystem. Alex, a dedicated scientist, was excited about discovering new marine species and understanding the dynamics of the coral reefs. One morning, Alex donned his diving gear and plunged into the crystal-clear waters of the Pacific Ocean. As he descended, he marveled at the colorful corals and diverse marine life surrounding him. He carefully documented his observations, taking photographs and notes as he moved gracefully through the water. While examining a particularly intricate section of the reef, Alex noticed a rare sea snake gliding through the water. The snake, with its distinctive black and yellow bands, was one of the most vicious creatures in the ocean. Alex was fascinated by its graceful movements and decided to get a closer look, hoping to capture detailed footage. As he approached the snake, it seemed curious, effortlessly weaving its way through the corals. Alex maintained a respectful distance, aware of its potent venom. However, he inadvertently moved too close in his eagerness to document the rare sighting. The sea snake, feeling threatened, suddenly became agitated. It coiled its body and struck with lightning speed, sinking its fangs into Alex's arm. Pain shot through Alex's body as the venom entered his bloodstream. He recoiled in shock, his mind racing. He knew that the venom was highly toxic and that his only chance of survival was to reach the surface and administer the anti-venom stored on the boat. His heart pounded as he realized the gravity of his situation. Fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm him, Alex began his ascent. Every movement was a struggle as the venom took its toll, weakening his muscles and clouding his mind. He focused on his breathing and the rhythm of his kicks, determined to reach the surface. The underwater terrain was treacherous, with sharp corals and narrow passages that hindered his progress. As he swam upwards, he could feel the sea snake trailing him, its presence a constant reminder of his danger. He had to be careful not to provoke another attack. The pain in his arm was intense and he could feel his strength waning with each passing second. Alex's vision blurred as he continued his ascent, his strength ebbing away with every kick. The venom coursed through his veins, making it harder to focus. He knew he had to stay calm and keep moving. The surface seemed so far away, but he couldn't afford to slow down. The sea snake was still nearby, its sleek body weaving through the water. Alex kept a wary eye on it, avoiding sudden movements that might provoke another strike. He needed to navigate the underwater terrain carefully, avoiding sharp corals and narrow gaps that could trap him. His breathing became labored as the venom's effects intensified. He felt a burning sensation spreading from the bite wound, accompanied by a numbness that made it difficult to move his arm. Desperation set in, but Alex forced himself to stay focused. He thought about the anti-venom on the boat, his lifeline to survival. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex broke through the water's surface. Gasping for air, he waved frantically to his team on the boat, who had been monitoring his dive. They quickly realized something was wrong and sprang into action. Alex shouted weakly for the anti-venom. His team quickly pulled him aboard, their faces filled with concern. One of his colleagues, Dr. Emily Wright, grabbed the anti-venom kit and administered the injection. Alex lay on the deck, his body trembling as the anti-venom began to counteract the effects of the venom. As the anti-venom took effect, Alex felt the pain gradually subside. His vision cleared, and he could feel his strength slowly returning. He knew he was not out of danger yet, but the immediate threat had passed. His team monitored his vital signs, providing support and reassurance. Hours later, as the boat returned to shore, Alex reflected on the harrowing experience. He had come face to face with one of the ocean's deadliest predators and survived. The encounter had been a stark reminder of the risks involved in his work. Still, it also reinforced his passion for marine biology and the importance of respecting the creatures he studied. Back on land, Alex received further medical treatment and rest. The experience had left him physically and emotionally drained, but he was grateful to be alive. He knew that his research could help raise awareness about the dangers of the ocean and the need to protect its inhabitants. As he recovered, Alex reviewed the footage and data he had collected. Despite the terrifying encounter, he had captured valuable information about the sea snake and the coral reef ecosystem. His dedication to his work remained unwavering, and he was determined to continue his research with even greater caution and respect for the underwater world. The ordeal had changed him, making him more aware of the fine line between curiosity and danger. Alex knew he would return to the waters of Fiji better prepared and more mindful of the risks. The ocean held many secrets, and he was committed to uncovering them while ensuring his and his team's safety. With a renewed sense of purpose, Dr. Alex Hayes looked forward to the next chapter of his journey as a marine biologist, ever grateful for the lessons learned from his close encounter with the deadly sea snake. It was June 7, 1996, a day that had started with bright skies and calm seas off the Bahamas coast. It was supposed to be a routine trip for Robert Darnell and his crew. Robert, 46, an experienced sailor, had set out with his brother Daniel and their two friends, Jack Monroe and Steve Callahan, on a week-long sailing adventure. They had planned to explore the remote islands in the Caribbean, taking in the beauty of the ocean. Their boat, the Sun Chaser, had been sturdy enough for the journey, or so they thought. The first few days went smoothly, the men bonding over shared stories, fishing, and enjoying the calm, open waters. They had been friends for years, often taking trips like this together to escape their daily routines. The boat had all the needed supplies, and they felt confident navigating through these waters. But the weather turned without warning. A sudden violent storm hit them late afternoon, far from any coastline. Dark clouds gathered quickly, the wind howled, and the waves grew large, brutally crashing against the boat. The crew scrambled to control the sails, but the storm was relentless. The Sun Chaser was tossed around like a toy in the angry sea, and within hours their worst fear came true. The boat capsized. Water poured into the cabin, and the men barely had time to grab a life raft and some emergency supplies before the boat sank beneath the surface. The storm raged on, but they had no choice but to climb into the small inflatable raft and hold on. Their boat was gone, leaving them adrift in the open ocean, and they did not know how long it would be until they were rescued. The sea calmed as the storm finally passed, but they faced a new challenge. They were stranded miles from shore, with no food or water except for a small amount in their emergency kit. The scorching sun beat down on them, and dehydration set in quickly. The vastness of the ocean around them was both beautiful and terrifying. No sign of land or any ships could come to their rescue. For the first day, they remained hopeful. They rationed their water, keeping their spirits up as best they could. But as the hours dragged on, the reality of their situation became clear. They were alone, floating in the endless blue, and their chances of survival grew slimmer with each passing moment. Then, on the second day, they noticed the fins. Oceanic white-tip sharks, known for their curiosity and aggressiveness, were common in these waters. Unlike many sharks, which typically avoid humans, the oceanic white-tip was known to be bold, especially when hungry. These sharks were opportunistic predators, and shipwreck survivors had often reported encounters with them. For Robert and his crew, the sight of the fins cutting through the water sent a chill through their already exhausted bodies. At first, the sharks simply circled the raft from a distance, watching the men with dark, unblinking eyes. There were 3 of them, their large bodies gliding effortlessly through the water. The sailors tried to remain calm, knowing that panicking would only worsen things. But as the hours passed, the sharks grew bolder, swimming closer to the raft, their fins cutting through the water rapidly. By the 3rd day, the sharks were no longer just circling. They began bumping the raft, testing its strength, their powerful bodies pushing against the small inflatable craft. Robert and the others could feel the impacts each time a shark made contact, their hearts pounding as they realized how fragile their situation had become. The sharks were hungry, and their patience was wearing thin. The men tried to scare the sharks away by banging on the raft's sides with their makeshift paddles. But the predators were relentless. The smell of the men, weak and sweating under the heat, had drawn them in, and the sharks wouldn't leave without a fight. The crew knew they had to act fast. They fashioned crude weapons out of pieces of metal they had managed to salvage from the boat's wreckage, sharpening the ends as best they could. The first attack came just after noon. One of the sharks, larger than the others, launched at the raft, its powerful jaws clamping down on the side. The men screamed in horror as the shark's teeth tore into the rubber, puncturing the raft and sending water splashing into the boat. Robert grabbed one of their makeshift weapons and stabbed at the shark's head, striking it several times before it let go. Blood filled the water, but it wasn't enough to kill the shark, only to anger it. The shark thrashed wildly in the water, and the other two sharks began circling faster, sensing the chaos. Jack was the next to strike, jabbing at one of the approaching sharks as it came too close, its fin brushing against the side of the raft. The men were exhausted, their arms heavy, but adrenaline kept them going. They fought with everything they had, knowing one more breach could sink them, but the sharks were relentless. As the sun began to set, the men knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. Their raft was slowly taking on water, and the sharks showed no signs of retreating. Desperation set in as they realized that night was falling, and their chances of survival would be even lower in the dark. Suddenly, one of the sharks lunged again, aiming for Steve, who had been leaning too far over the raft's edge. The shark's massive jaws clamped down on his leg, terrifyingly pulling him into the water. Steve screamed, thrashing in the water as the shark tore into him, his blood mixing with the ocean as the other sharks moved in for the kill. Robert and Daniel tried to pull him back into the raft, but it was too late. The sharks were too fast, too strong. Steve's body disappeared beneath the surface, and the water around them turned red. The remaining three men watched in horror, their minds barely able to process what had just happened. The sharks continued to circle, but now the men knew they were next. The ocean had become a battleground, and they were losing. They fought off the sharks as best they could, but exhaustion and fear had taken their toll. With night approaching, they knew they wouldn't last much longer. When the Coast Guard finally found them, the raft was barely afloat. Robert, Daniel, and Jack were pulled from the water, weak and delirious, their bodies covered in wounds from the sharks' relentless attacks. Steve was never found. The ocean had claimed him, and the sharks had left only a bloody memory behind. The sailors would live to tell their story, but the scars, both physical and emotional, would remain with them forever. The ocean, once their playground, had turned into a nightmare, and the sight of a fin cutting through the water would haunt them for the rest of their lives. March 2001. College students, including John Andrews and Nicole White, chose Volusia County, Florida, as their spring break destination. Excited for a week of sun and sand, they looked forward to a break from university life. Unbeknownst to Michael Carter, he was also unwittingly selected as the target for their planned prank. The group chose a stretch of secluded beach away from the crowds. It was perfect for campfires at night and other daring adventures. The group was spirited as they set up camp beneath a starlit sky. The ocean was whispering only a few steps from their tents. On the third night, as the ocean breeze carried laughter from the group, Nicole, with a mischievous smile and twinkling eyes, suggested a harmless joke to make the evening memorable for Michael. Feeling adventurous, the group eagerly agreed. Always good-natured, Michael soon found himself at the center of a prank that would shift from fun to terror. Michael was absorbed in making s'mores, unaware of the whispered plots around him. They blindfolded him and pretended it was a joke before leading him to the water, where they gave him a little scare, pretending to push. They knew Michael would laugh off the joke, so they blindfolded him and led him to the water. Emily tied a bandana over Michael's eyes as they walked along the beach. She laughed as she assured him he would love what was coming. Guided by the hands of his friends, Michael laughed and joked, unaware that he was perilously close to the edge of the ocean. John pretended to stumble as he pushed Michael into the shallow waves. The group laughed, expecting Michael to join in. The situation quickly took a horrific turn. Michael's splashes grew frantic as he struggled to gain his footing, when a prominent shadowy figure appeared near Michael under the water's surface. The innocent laughter on the shore abruptly stopped. The commotion in the water and the shark's thrashing likely attracted the shark. As the reality of their danger dawned, panic replaced laughter. John was the first to react, his shouts of "Shark" paralyzing the group with fear. However, the urgency of the situation quickly spurred them into action. Kevin, the first to recover, entered the water and urged Michael to remain calm. Simultaneously, Nicole, who recovered quickly, ran to their camp to grab a life buoy. Despite his fear, Kevin's voice remained steady as he reassured Michael, telling him to keep still while they worked to get him out. They threw the buoy towards Michael when Nicole returned with it. Kevin was the first to reach him and helped him hold on tightly to the buoy. They began to pull Michael back toward shore together, coordinated and desperate. The shark drew closer, its dorsal fin cutting through the water menacingly. Emily and John worked together on the shore, their combined strength slowly overcoming the ocean's pull. As they dragged Michael toward safety, everyone held their breath, a mixture of fear and hope hanging in the cool evening air. They finally pulled Michael away from the water's edge and onto the sand. His laughter was gone and he began to breathe heavily, relieved. They collapsed in front of him. Their prank had turned into a potentially life-threatening situation. The weight of the possible loss hung heavy in the air as they tried to calm their racing hearts. Michael lay on the sand beach, trying to catch his breath as the realization of his near-death experience sank in. The group gathered around him, the bonfire crackling in the background starkly contrasted with the fear and coldness that had just enveloped them. Faces paled under the moonlight as the friends remained silent. Each was lost in their thoughts. Nicole kneeled beside Michael with her hand on his shoulders, her voice barely audible, overwhelmed with guilt. Michael, clearly shaken, slowly sat back up and nodded in understanding. They were all too aware of the shark's shadow, a reminder of how fragile their joy had been. Kevin, who had been instrumental in pulling Michael to safety, paced along the water's edge, scanning the waves seriously, emphasizing the need for caution. Emily wrapped her arms around herself and nodded in agreement, sticking to more straightforward, safer activities like light hiking, beach games, and sunbathing, avoiding further scares. The ever-organized man John grabbed his phone and checked local shark activity warnings. He read aloud from an article dated the previous weekend about sightings in the area. They should have checked before deciding to go for a night swim or play any water prank. They agreed. A new pact was born from the terror of that night. The friends decided to spend the rest of their holiday strengthening their friendships while respecting the environment and its dangers. The following days went by without incident. The group played volleyball, visited local attractions, and told stories around a bonfire, this time keeping a respectful distance away from the edge of the water. Michael's experience became a lesson to them all. It reminded them of the importance and necessity of safety. Kevin suggested a final gathering around the fire on their last evening while packing their things. His tone was joyful and sad as he proposed finishing the trip on a good note. The warmth of the fire battled against the cold ocean breeze. John proposed a toast, raising his bottle in a gesture of camaraderie. As the glasses clinked together, smiles spread among the friends, each feeling grateful for a bond that had not only endured trials, but had grown stronger. The following day, as they left the beach, the sun rose above the ocean and painted the skies in shades of orange and rose. They were not blind to the beauty of this scene. The scene starkly contrasted with the dark and fearful night they had just experienced. It served as a reminder to them of both nature's beauty and peril. On the way back to school, they discussed their next vacation, this time in the mountains, to escape the unpredictable ocean. The laughter was back, but with a new appreciation for nature's forces and the unintended effects of a simple joke. Michael hugged his friends as they said goodbye. He laughed, but his smile was genuine and wiser. They laughed and agreed wholeheartedly. Their ordeal was behind them, but not forgotten. The Great Barrier Reef was bathed in a warm Australian sun, creating shimmering patterns that reflected off the white sands. Liam Baxter led a small group of snorkelers to explore a lesser-known section of the reef. The vibrant colors of the water were teeming with marine life. Liam guided the group expertly with his many years of experience. The snorkelers eagerly followed in their wetsuits and bright colors, admiring the coral structures, the vibrant life, and the busy activity around them. The divers were a mixture of nature lovers and thrill seekers, with cameras ready to capture this underwater spectacle. As they delved deeper into coral reefs, the water became more intense, and the coral formations complexed. Between the coral reefs, fish of all colors darted, and sea turtles glided gracefully. The world beneath the waves was a hidden paradise that held endless wonders, unbeknownst to the group. However, they drifted to a remote area of the coral reef, away from the usual snorkeling routes. Liam checked his GPS after noticing the changes in the current of the water and the types of coral. He was concerned when he realized they were too close to known bull shark territory. Bull sharks are standard on the Great Barrier Reef, but are known for their unpredictable behavior. A large shadow moved below the group as Liam considered their next step. A massive bull shark was visible in the water. Its muscular body easily cut through the water, and its eyes revealed nothing about its intentions. The group's tranquility was shattered. Through snorkels, gasps were muffled, and fearful eyes widened. Liam beckoned everyone to remain calm and close. He knew that panicking would only provoke the shark. Liam's hand signals instructed the group to stay with him and slowly return to the vessel. His calm demeanor soothed the group, yet tensions remained palpable. The shark circled them as they swam back. Each of the loops it made was meticulous and almost curious. Liam watched the shark closely, looking for any changes in its behavior that could indicate an impending threat. The group moved together with deliberate and controlled movements. It was a long way to the boat's safety, so every stroke felt risky. The shark's presence was a stark and unsettling reminder of how unpredictable the ocean can be. The line between admiration and fear blurred as the group navigated through the stunning yet menacing coral reef. The group was intruders in the territory of one of the ocean's most powerful predators. As the bull shark's shadow loomed below, the journey back to their boat was long and slow. The vastness and safety of the ship felt distant. The reef life continued to thrive as they swam. This was a stark contrast to the drama that unfolded at the surface. The group was tightly grouped, and their eyes were occasionally drawn downwards to the shadow below them. The giant, imposing bull shark continued to make slow, deliberate movements, reminding them of the danger of their situation. Liam led with calm urgency and navigated the water with accuracy. His experience on these waters was now their most significant asset. He checked over his shoulder to ensure no one was lost or behind. The dark shark shape was visible in the stark white sand, adding to the surreality of the situation. As they approached the boat, water began to swell slowly, with sunlight penetrating the depths, illuminating coral landscapes below. The beauty of coral reefs was almost mocking compared to their fear. Liam pointed up, signaling their approaching proximity to the boat. He urged everyone to speed up gently to avoid splashing, which could further provoke the follower. As if sensing the group's intent to escape, the shark tightened its circle, making its movements more purposeful. Each member of the group felt their tension rise with each shark pass. The sleek shape cut through the water with a grace that belied its strength. As the boat became visible, the group began to murmur in relief. Liam's look at the stern of the ship quickly stopped the murmur, reminding everyone they were unsafe. The group approached the stern where the latter was silently waiting in the water. Liam lifted the first snorkeler while his eyes were constantly scanning the surrounding water. One by one, the group climbed on board, feeling relieved as they stepped onto the deck and discarded their snorkel gear before collapsing into the benches. Liam was the last person to leave, and he kept an eye on everyone until he knew they were all aboard safely. He climbed out of the water only after he felt his body relax as his feet touched the deck. After being alerted, the boat's skipper started the engine. The sound was a soothing growl in the silence of the ocean. The group gathered around the boat's stern as it began to move. They watched the shadow of a bull shark disappear into the depths. It was no longer interested in the humans now that they were outside its territory. Each person was lost in their thoughts as they processed the experience. Liam briefed the group, his voice steady but his eyes reflecting the intensity of the last hour. He looked each person in the eye, emphasizing the respect that must always be shown to the ocean and all its inhabitants, acknowledging their fortune that day. The sounds of nature, such as the crashing of the waves, the calls of seabirds, and the roar of the ocean, became louder and more intense. As the group disembarked from the ship, their goodbyes were more heartfelt. Their experiences had brought them together profoundly and unexpectedly. The bull shark circle reminded them of the line separating adventure from danger in the vast ocean. In the summer of 1998, the Florida Keys buzzed with excitement as fishermen worldwide gathered for the annual deep-sea fishing competition. Among them was Jack Larson, a seasoned fisherman with years of experience. Jack was well known in the fishing community for his skill and determination. He was determined to catch the biggest fish this year and claim the top prize. The day was perfect for fishing. The sky was clear and the Atlantic Ocean waters were calm. Jack and his crew set out early in the morning on his boat. They cruised to a well-known fishing spot, hoping to land a massive catch. Jack's heart raced with anticipation as he cast his line into the deep blue waters. Hours passed with little activity, but Jack remained patient. Suddenly, he felt a strong tug on his line. His adrenaline surged as he realized he had hooked something big. He tightened his grip and began the battle to reel in the fish. His crew gathered around, cheering him on. The fish was mighty, pulling with such force that Jack had to use all his strength to keep it from escaping. Sweat dripped down his face as he fought against the creature's might. As the minutes turned into an hour, Jack caught a glimpse of his catch, a massive swordfish, its long, sharp bill glinting in the sunlight. But the swordfish was not ready to give up. With a sudden burst of energy, it charged towards the boat. Jack's eyes widened in shock as the fish's bill pierced the hull with a loud crack. The impact threw Jack off balance, and before he knew it, he was hurled overboard into the cold, churning waters. Disoriented and gasping for air, Jack struggled to stay afloat. The salt water stung his eyes, and he could feel the sting of a wound on his arm where the swordfish's bill had grazed him. Panic set in as he realized he was in the water with an enraged swordfish. He had to act fast. The swordfish circled him, its movements quick and aggressive. Jack kicked hard, trying to distance himself from the dangerous fish. He glanced back at the boat, which was taking on water from the hole in the hull. His crew frantically tried to patch it up and throw him a lifeline. Jack's mind raced as he tried to figure out how to survive. He knew the swordfish's bill was lethal, capable of inflicting severe injury or even death. He had to stay calm and think strategically. Every movement could provoke another attack from the fish. He remembered his training and the countless hours he had spent at sea. Jack focused on staying as still as possible, hoping the swordfish would lose interest. But the fish wasn't giving up. It charged at him again, and Jack barely dodged its lethal bill. The struggle seemed endless. Jack's muscles ached and he could feel his strength waning. He needed to return to the boat, but the swordfish was relentless. He kicked again, trying to create more distance, but the fish followed, its eyes locked on him. As he floated in the open ocean, Jack could hear his crew shouting his name. He knew they were doing everything possible to save him, but time was running out. He had to survive until they could reach him. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the water, and the temperature dropped. Jack took a deep breath, steeling himself for the next attack. He couldn't give up. He had to fight with everything he had, using his knowledge and experience to outsmart the mighty predator. His life depended on it. Jack's heart pounded as he floated in the cold water, the setting sun casting an eerie glow over the ocean. The swordfish circled him again, its movements swift and deliberate. He had to keep his wits about him, relying on his years of experience to survive. The swordfish lunged once more, its sharp bill aiming for Jack. He twisted his body just in time, narrowly avoiding the deadly strike. His arm throbbed with pain from the earlier wound, and he could feel his energy draining away. But he couldn't give up. He had to stay alive. He glanced back at his boat. His crew was working feverishly to patch the hole in the hull and get the ship back in motion. They shouted words of encouragement and threw a lifeline into the water. Jack saw the rope and knew he had to reach it. With determination, Jack kicked his legs and swam towards the lifeline. The swordfish followed, relentless in its pursuit. He felt a surge of hope as he got closer to the rope. His fingers brushed against it and he grabbed hold, clinging tightly. His crew pulled with all their might, dragging Jack towards the boat. The swordfish charged again, but Jack kicked at it, keeping it at bay. Inch by inch, he was hauled closer to safety. His arms burned with effort, but he didn't let go. Finally, he reached the side of the boat. His crew grabbed him under the arms and hauled him aboard. Jack collapsed on the deck, gasping for breath. He was soaked and shivering, but he was alive. The swordfish thrashed in the water below, still angry but unable to reach him. The crew quickly tended to Jack's injury, wrapping his arm in a makeshift bandage. They managed to patch the hole in the hull enough to keep the boat afloat. As they returned to shore, Jack lay on the deck, staring at the darkening sky. The journey back was tense. Jack's mind replayed the harrowing encounter with the swordfish. He knew he had come close to death, and it was a sobering thought. The Florida Keys, usually a place of beauty and adventure, had turned into a battle for survival. When they finally reached the dock, Jack's crew helped him off the boat and rushed him to a nearby clinic. The doctor there cleaned and stitched up his wound, praising Jack's toughness and resilience. Jack nodded, but inside he felt relief and exhaustion. Word of Jack's ordeal spread quickly among the fishing community. Many were amazed by his story of survival, but Jack didn't see himself as a hero. He knew he had been lucky and couldn't shake the memory of the swordfish's relentless attacks. In the days that followed, Jack took time to recover and reflect. He realized how fragile life could be and how important it was to respect the power of nature. He had always loved the sea, but now he understood its dangers more deeply. Jack decided to share his story with others, hoping to raise awareness about the risks of deep-sea fishing. He wanted to make sure other fishermen were prepared and cautious to prevent such close calls in the future. His experience had taught him valuable lessons, and he was determined to use them for good. Jack felt renewed purpose as he stood on the shore looking at the vast ocean. He knew he would return to the sea, but with a newfound respect for its power. The battle with the swordfish had changed him, but hadn't taken away his love for the ocean. Instead, it had deepened it, making him a wiser and more cautious fisherman.